Hello folks, so in this video I wanted to talk about MCP servers. MCP is short for Model Context Protocol, so this is in the context of AI, artificial intelligence. So I wanted to specifically talk about Loki, Grafana Loki MCP server. So Grafana Loki is a log management system, so we use Loki in my company. So my team and other teams have been trying to use AI to do things. For example, develop features, develop systems, and whatnot. And in my team has been trying to create MCP servers. For example, for Prometheus, for Loki. For Prometheus, there is one open source one, but I don't think we are using that. We built one ourselves, and for Loki also we built it ourselves. So I'm going to talk about the Loki one now and tell you what it's like. So I'm still a user of AI than a creator of AI or someone who understands AI very deeply. I've learned neural networks long back, but I don't remember it much now. Neural networks or genetic algorithms and things like that. But yeah, I do understand that LLMs, that is large language models, work based on some context and they just can guess the right thing to say next, which can be code in a programming language or just a English word sentence, or it can be any language also. So large language models and small language models. I mean, I've not used much of small language models. Large language models I've used only Gemini AI much, not much of ChatGPT, and not much of the other popular ones like Claude and all. So let's get started. So my team actually uses Cursor AI, and they put it on auto, or they choose a specific model, LLM model like Claude and whatnot. I think they had tried out GitHub Copilot, but they left it and they now have a paid Cursor AI subscription. So and basically we use the MCP server, the MCP tools in Cursor AI, and we configure Cursor AI to actually connect to the MCP servers using the MCP client that Cursor has. So the Loki MCP server that we've built, we've built it using Golang, and I believe they use AI for this, but I wasn't part of the development team. I am only noticing it now, as in looking at the code and all. I didn't even have access to the code, but it's my team that has developed it, one of the team members. So it's mostly basic, nothing too magical. But let me tell you, what kind of open source software we have used and all. And I think they use AI for building this using Golang. The Prometheus MCP server seems to be built using Python, though I think the package manager they use is UV ultraviolet and not pip, which is a popular package manager. I think it's because ultraviolet is pretty fast or something. Cool. So Loki MCP server is built using Golang, so you can actually find out go.mod and go.some files and all that. So looking at the open source libraries that we've used, the main one is Mark 3 Labs user, the GitHub user Mark 3 Labs. Their MCP-Go software. So it's a library, or you can call it as a package, as you call it in Golang, or modules, Golang module. So MCP Go, just a moment, let me go to the MCP-Go, which is under the GitHub user Mark 3 Labs, is an implementation of the Model Context Protocol, enabling seamless integration between LLM applications and external data sources and tools. Okay? So you can actually find this on mcp-go.dev. So I think the Go is to say Golang, and MCP, of course, Model Context Protocol. So I don't know if they have any other implementation, Python or whatever. Looks like Mark 3 Labs is actually a company, so it's not a user, it's more of an organization, GitHub organization. So looks like they are empowering businesses with cutting-edge software solutions, from AI-driven analytics to seamless cloud integrations. They're creating technology that improves lives and transforms industries. Cool. So yeah, so let's look at the MCP Go for now. So just a moment, let me see if they have anything else. They have quite some repositories in their organization, some 22 of them. So okay, so I'm going to be looking at just the MCP-Go, though they have so many other things. Something called looker.dev. I don't know what it is. Looker CLI. Anyways, so looking at the MCP-Go, so it's a Golang implementation of the model context protocol. So it helps you with server components and also I think client components. So I think it has package client, provides MCP model context protocol client implementations, and there's a server package which provides, I think it's actually auto-generated. I think it's auto-generated using Go generate. So and they have examples of how to use it. So yep. So package MCP defines the core types and interfaces for the model context protocol. Package MCP does implements helper functions for testing MCP servers. And they have some utilities for logging up. Cool. So this we use it, and we also use Google's UUID Golang module or package. We also use SPF13's SPF13 GitHub users, Cast library. So and we also use BioSIDA 95/URL URI template v3. So it's like a URI template package for I think doing URI stuff. Like for example, generate URIs. I think can also generate a regex that matches expansion of the URI template. Okay. Looks like some template related stuff with respect to URI and all. And so Cast, SPF13's Cast, look at that. It's basically easy and safe casting from one type to another. So it's basically type casting, that's all. So it's not some broadcast or whatever. And Google's Google GitHub organization's UUID library. Cool. So what they've done is, I think they've created a server. I'm looking at the code and I'm trying to understand what they've done. I've actually used it as a user. So they have some 3 tools. So MCP servers provide tools. So 2 tools are to get data or get context, get information regarding, say in this case, Loki, which is the external service that AI is going to talk to through the MCP server, the Loki MCP server. So there are 3 tools. One is to so 2 of them is to get data. For example, say get the different label names in Loki. So and then get the different label values in Loki. So these 2 are to get data or get context to understand the specific context of the users, because every Loki instance might have its own set of label names and label values. And then you also need to be able to run queries on Loki, so that you can, I think these are logql queries, log query language, which you can run to get logs, I guess. So I'm still learning Loki and stuff. So you can actually use the tool, the query tool, to actually query Loki. So query, like run query, and then you have get label names, and you have get label values. So just a moment. Yes. So the query thing is called Loki underscore query, and so these are the names of the tools. So label names is called Loki underscore label names, just to say that this is all Loki related. So Loki underscore label names, and then you can actually probably even say run query over here. And then for values, it's called Loki underscore label underscore values. So this is the name of the tool that the MCP server is providing. So 3 tools: one to query the label names, one to query the label values, and then next to basically get, when I say query, get the label names and get the label values. The third thing is to run a query to get the logs. So, and I'm assuming that the AI understands how to run a query. For example, for running a query, looks like MCP takes up what do you say? Different. The every tool takes up different arguments or parameters of sorts, and the MCP server defines if it's required or not, and or if it's optional. So I think a lot of things are optional that we have created, like say URL and all that, because the MCP looks like I think this. So one thing I noticed is the MCP server that we have created is supposed to connect with one Loki server, but it can connect with multiple, I think. But we are mainly connecting it to one Loki server, and for example, the what do you say? The staging or say development MCP server. So there is a Loki in development, and so we have different Loki instances. One in development, one in stage like nightly, and then staging, which is kind of like prod, and then prod. So even for development, so developer environment or dev or development environment. So in dev environment we have one Loki, and then we have say nightly one Loki, and then we also have staging one Loki. But for production we have multiple production environments. So each one has its own Loki. It's not like one Loki to take care of it all. So and they are all isolated. The different production environments are isolated because they are for different regions or different purposes. Or for different industries, say healthcare and all, with its own limitations, like with its own security and stuff like that. And also, in case of like if you need it for a specific customer, we have separate environment for a specific customer also. So we have Loki instances for each and every one of these environments. So for each and every one of these environments, we have implemented and run a MCP server in each of these environments. So I believe it connects, the MCP server just connects to the Loki in that environment, and cannot connect to the Loki in any other environment unless it has network access. Usually these are all isolated environments, and there's no like VPC peering, and also we use AWS, so I don't think they connect, I'm sure they don't connect dev to any prod environments or dev to staging unless they really need it. Dev staging, the dev nightly staging, and then multiple prod environments. So there is a parameter though which says for running the query, logql query. So there is a parameter for the query itself which is required, which is a logql query string. I think the AI has to know how to write logql basically. So there is no way of the MCP server teaching it or telling it or giving it context around how to write or how logql looks like, the syntax and semantics of logql. And then the other parameters are like URL, username, basically for connection. So URL, username, password. I think the URL will also have port apart from the domain name or any host name that you need. And then any access token, and then what is the time. So since you're querying for logs, or when you want logs, metrics, events, traces, spans, you will actually ask for a specific time period. So what is the start time and the end time, and then the limit, how many entries you want, because you can get too many entries, and generally the organization ID. It looks like there is some specific for, I think Loki has something called organization ID. I have to check. And then the format, output format. Do you want it to be in a specific format, JSON, or in this case there is text, and then there is raw also. So this is one of the tools. The other tools are basically to get label names and label values. So for that, the parameters are again connection details related stuff, and authentication related stuff, which will also help with authorization. So URL, username, password, token, and all. And then the timing again, start time, end time. I don't think you need time to understand the label names. Something to check out. I'll probably talk to my team and understand why this start and end is there. And then organization ID, maybe it is needed because it's maybe every organization ID is isolated and has its own labels. And then the format of output, and then the label names to get the label values finally. Again, connection related stuff, and to get label values of a particular label. So it's not like multiple labels. Given one label name, what are the different values? I'm guessing here you will need the start and end, because if there are multiple logs, you need some specific set of logs, and then what are the label values. Okay, I'm guessing then it's the same thing, same is true for even the start and end for label, get the label names, because every log it will have a label name. Maybe newer logs have more label names and whatnot, and so hence you need the start and end, I think, there also, to be able to say these are the logs, start and end, and these are logs between that. And weirdly, there is no limiting of entries though. I'm not sure why that is the case. In the case of running query, there is a limiting of entries, but for label, there is no limiting of entries. But anyways, so it gets the label names, and for label values, it gets the label values given a label name. There is connection related details like URL, username, password, token, so authentication related stuff, and then start in, and then organization ID, and then the format of output. So these are the parameters. So these three tools, we are creating it, and so in this case, so there is a streamable HTTP server that the MCP-Go library provides. So we are using that to create a streamable HTTP server, and we use Mux, Gorilla Mux library. Just a moment. Not Gorilla Mux. We are just using the usual Mux. Gorilla also has Mux. I think it's called Gorilla Mux. So that is another library popular in Golang. We are using the usual Mux multiplexer for the HTTP multiplexer, and we use the streamable HTTP server to stream the stuff. So I need to go read about the streamable HTTP server. Maybe it's an HTTP 2 which has streams concept. I don't think it's HTTP 3 or anything, but yeah. And then they also have something called STDIO server. So I think there are two servers basically running. One is to serve STDIO. I think the logging is basically standard input and output. In streamable server, I think there is a separate set of logging, and I can see actually we have a logging related package in the utils, so where we define how logging happens. So there's a logger and that we use. Looks like it's not being used anyways. Okay, we cannot replace. Okay, so it's weird that it's not being used anywhere. I think it's dead code. Something to talk to my team about. Anyways, so just a moment. New logger. Yeah, I think it's dead code. Something to talk to my team about. So yeah, I think it's dead code. Cool. It's dead code. We'll get it out, I guess. So basically, we have the streamable HTTP server, and if you go inside it, it has handlers for handling different things. So, for example, one moment. In its serve HTTP, which is the popular method to run stuff, there is handle post method, handle get method, and handle delete, right? And then the remain for anything else, it says not found. So 404 basically. So just a moment. So okay, so they have start and shutdown and all in the MCP-Go. So basically, I'm looking at the MCP-Go's libraries thing. So that is there. So they have a lot of code in MCP-Go. Anyways, so where is the code that we have written? So we have actually written the code while adding the tool. So we say what is the tool, what are the parameters and the name of the tool, and then the implementation for it. So we say handle Loki query, handle for handling the running of Loki query, and then handle Loki label names for handling getting the Loki's label names, and then handling Loki label values for getting label values from Loki. So for handling Loki query, so we basically get the different arguments or parameters and use that, say the connection string, connection related details, username, password and token and all, and then organization and all. And then we of course get the query. We also get the start and end, and of course do some validation and all if there's any issue. And then the format, output format and all. And then we finally build the query. So build the query and run the query. So while building the query, I think it's just using one moment while we build the query. So just a moment. So yeah, I mean the parameter, one of the parameters is URL, but if you don't give the URL, there's a default Loki URL that's taken up, which is actually provided as part of running the server itself. So the MCP client doesn't have to, the user doesn't have to send the parameter using the MCP client, send the URL parameter. Instead, the MCP server already has a default Loki URL, right? So just a moment. So just a moment. Yeah, so basically it will connect to the Loki basically. So we use the URL library and parse the URL and all, and finally we basically just a moment. So in case there's no specific URL path or URI path in the Loki URL, we are specifying that for the API, Loki API, in case it's not already there. And then finally we also say stuff like query range and all, so in case it's not present. And then finally we use the query parameters in URLs. So we are setting query start time, end time, limit and all. And finally we give the built Loki URL. So with the Loki URL, just a moment, they execute the Loki URL. So basically, given the URL, it creates a GET request and to Loki, and one moment, it gets the response. So basically, yeah, so it gets the response, and just a moment, gets the response, and then it just gives it off. It passes the JSON. It's a JSON response. So it passes the JSON, and then gives it up. So that's all there is to it. So that's the execution. So it's pretty basic, and formatting the Loki results, since there are different output formats, it can be raw, JSON and text. So according to the format, basically, for example, if it's JSON, they just they already have a JSON only. So basically they just take the JSON and indent it and then show the JSON, and then finally I think, okay, just a moment. Actually, they parse the JSON and keep it, so they have it as a parsed JSON, not actually JSON string. So yeah, they parse the JSON, so they have it as an object. So they again stringify the object, as in convert the object into a JSON string, and also indent it while converting it. So if it's raw, I think what they do is they look at each and every value, I think, and then they put it in just a line. There's no JSON, there's no formatting and all. If it's text, then looks like there is some specific way they're actually putting it without, instead of it being raw. So there are some specific details that they're putting. So in raw, they put timestamp, labels, and the values and all that. In text, they put values and then timestamp in some specific format and all. So yeah. Finally, yeah. So these two are like the formatting and JSON, raw, and text and all. And finally, just a moment. They execute, format the Loki results, the Loki logs, the queries that after running the query, LockQL query, and then they broadcast the query results. I'm not sure why the broadcast is needed to SSE clients. Okay, so server side events clients if available. So basically, they're sending the results to server side. Okay, so looks like there are no sends the query results to all connected SSE clients. As of now, in the simplified approach, we don't explicitly broadcast events. The SSE server automatically handles tool calls through the MCP server. This function is kept as a placeholder for future enhancements, or if you decide to implement custom broadcasting later. So, looks like the MCP server, the MCP-Go server, the library server itself takes care of this apparently. Something to check out. And then finally, they return the result text, the tool result text, with the formatted result. So this is for the just a moment. This is for the query tool. So we just went through the whole thing. Query tool and handle the query. So yeah, so the remaining thing is basically broadcasting results and all we saw, parsing time and all, build a Loki query URL, execute Loki query, all of this we have seen. Format also. So finally the other things remaining is the Loki label names tool and handling that, and label values tool. So in label names, I told you about what are the parameters. So even in label values, I told the parameters. Let's look at how the handling is done to get the label names, to get the context. So in label names, we basically get all the parameters and build a Loki label URL. So where we put queries around, put the get URLs, proper URL path and all. For example, for the API /Loki/API/v1 and all, and then /labels in case that's missing, so to get the labels, and then the start and end time and all, and finally execute it and then format it. So execute it along with any authorization headers, the token, and then any headers regarding organization, say org ID and all, and then finally run it, and then just a moment, finally unmarshal it based on the response. So based on the response, unmarshal it, and it's a JSON response, so unmarshal it, so parse it, and then finally return the result. And after executing, I think labels query, okay, so after execution, I think after building and execution, there is formatting. So just a moment, so label, there's formatting basically. So formatting Loki label results. So basically over here, what we're doing is the usual JSON means stringifies as a JSON, and then if it's raw and text, accordingly put it as these are the label names and whatnot. So put in raw text, they just put it as in not raw text. Raw is different, text is different. In text, they're just putting 1, 2, 3, 4 and telling the label names. In raw, it's just the label names with new lines. So that's it. And finally, you have just a moment. So you give the result, to the client, the MCP client that asked for the label names, right? The other thing pending is now label values. So label values, we basically again get the parameters. We build the Loki label values URL, which basically has slash values and all in its URL, and then we put the query parameters for start and end and everything. And then finally, just a moment. So finally, we execute the Loki label values query. So it's again a get request with authorization, it's a header and everything set, and we get the JSON response, and we parse it, and then we finally format it according to the expected output format, which can be JSON, which is just stringifying it as JSON. For raw, it's just simply putting the raw values. For text, it's like putting 1, 2, 3, 4 numbering, ordered numbering, and finally we give the result. So it's pretty straightforward. And finally, so these are being used to actually run this Loki MCP server, Model Context Protocol server. And in terms of usage, there's an example usage that I noticed, and I also tried it out. I noticed some errors or issues, but let me tell you what the developer of the MCP server noticed. They had some really cool stuff. So basically, we have the cursor ID. We change the settings in the cursor ID. The cursor settings, we put the MCP tool connection string and all. So basically the URL. So this is in the cursor MCP settings. So it's under a file called mcp.json, which you can find in the cursor settings under tools and integrations under MCP tools. When you say add MCP, custom MCP, you will actually notice that it will open up MCP JSON file. So you can, so this MCP JSON file is like a global thing. If you want project specific, you can actually have it in the project root under the .cursor directory called mcp.json. So once you add the name of the MCP server and the URL and any headers that you need, for example, say content type application JSON and all, and then the access token, which is a content type is to say what is the format that you need to send the content in, the request in, which is JSON. And then for access token, we have an access token for our MCP servers, so we use that. This is an internal access management system. So once we do this and enable it in the cursor ID, you can actually see the green dot in the MCP server along with the different tools. It will say 3 tools available, which is Loki label names, Loki label values, and Loki query. Finally, you can actually go ahead and say, using this context, for example, Loki MCP server in a specific environment. So you can say Loki MCP server dev. So assuming that that's the name you gave it for the tool in your cursor settings, you can say MCP. So using this Loki MCP server nightly MCP tool, can we get the exception or errors in some service, say ABC service, in the last 1 hour, and then say the current date and time is the current date and time, or you can say current date and time is blah blah, like XYZ, some say 10 p.m. IST, Indian Standard Time, right? Given a date, so date and time stamp both. So let's say today is 22nd July, so you can say 22nd July. Currently it's 8:30, so you can say maybe something like 22nd July 2025. 6:30 p.m. or 6:30 or 18:30, and then IST. So now what the AI will do is, so in this case actually for the person who wrote the MCP server, they were trying it out. They noticed that the AI says, I'll help you query the Loki logs for exceptions and errors in this XYZ service. And let me break this down into steps. And first I'll query Loki to see what labels are available to ensure we can properly filter for the service. So it is looking at the Loki label names. Now that I can see the available labels, so the label names, Let me check the values for the app label to ensure we get the correct service name. So it's looking at the different values because we said XYZ is XYZ service, so it's going to look for the different values in the app label name, assuming app is the service related thing. In my case, it assumed its service and started looking for that, but it couldn't find it. Then it looked for the label names, then found that app is the name of the label to talk about the service name, to put the service name. So, and then it says now you can see that XYZ service is indeed one of the available services. Let me construct a query to look for errors and exceptions in the last 1 hour. I'll use a logql query that looks for error related terms. So runs the logql query using Loki query tool. So the tool helped with finding the label names, finding the label values, given a label name, and then running a Loki logql query. Finally, it says based on the logs from the last 1 hour, I can see several issues in the XYZ service. In this case, the example is like MongoDB index conflicts, multiple errors related to index conflicts with ABC index across different collections and multiple sets of collections. So it's a MongoDB, so it talks about how there are multiple errors in the logs related to index conflicts because index conflicts with some ABC index across different collections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 something. And then authorization issues. So there is some authorization exception related to the authorization system that we use internally. And then error message, authorization call failed, unable to get authorization result. And it says this is affecting requests from user ID, blah blah blah. And then object filter error, get recent errors from XYZ. So it says, okay, so object filter error, I can't read much. Looks like there was some error there. And then finally MongoDB timeout related error. So socket timeout error while creating index on some specific collection, read timed out is the error. And then logback configuration errors, multiple errors in the logback configuration related to Spring profile and appender references. So most of the traffic appears to be from automated testing. User agent user agent name contains some name. Based on it, it assumes that it's an automated testing because it says something PyApps or something. And while there are errors, the service is still functioning as most requests are completing with HTTP 200 status code. So the AI is able to look at the results, the log, and say that HTTP 200. So a lot of it is good. It's still functioning. The most critical issues appear to be the MongoDB index conflicts, which could affect database performance because if there are some index conflict issues and index related issues, there can be database performance issues because database performance depends on indexes and all, especially for large databases. And then the authorization evaluation failures, which could affect user access. The MongoDB timeout, which could indicate performance issues with the database. Would you like me to focus on any particular aspect of these issues or provide more detailed information about any specific error? So the developer said that the MongoDB index conflicts which could affect database performance. Basically, it's one of the issues. So it's kind of like focusing on that particular aspect. There's no specific aspect they've mentioned. So they've just mentioned one of the specific errors. So what the AI does is let me analyze the MongoDB index conflicts in more detail. So looking at the logs, there's a consistent pattern of index conflicts happening across multiple collections. Here's the specific error that's repeating. And it says error command failed with error 85 index options conflict and on. Index already exists with a different something. So this error is occurring in the following on the following collections. So the list of collections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then finally, it says the error indicates that the application is trying to create an index named ABC on the XYZ field. However, there's already an existing index on the same field but with a different name. So there's an index on the same field but with a different name, and you're trying to create one more index on the same field with a different name. So this is error code 85 index options conflict from MongoDB. This type of conflict can occur when different versions of the application try to create indexes. So for example, you have V1, you are rolling out V2. So V2 is creating an index again. So different versions of the application try to create indexes or indices with different names but on the same fields. During database migrations, for example, you figured that you want a different name for your index or indexes or indices. So in this case, you take XYZ index or whatever ABC index. So during database migration where index names are changed, you change it, but old indexes or indices aren't properly dropped. So you didn't drop the old index though. So when multiple services try to manage the same indexes, so it's like on the same field, same indexes with different configurations. So this can happen when multiple services, like say service A and service B, try to manage the same indexes. You want the same indexes, but you have different names for the indexes. Same index as in index on the same field, but with different configurations. It can be a different kind of index or different configuration. There are different kinds of indexes and all, I guess. So it's talking about this type of conflict can occur when multiple services try to manage the same indexes with different configurations. And then the impact of these conflicts, performance, while not immediately critical as an index on XYZ, still exists. So there is some index and you're trying to create another index on the same field, probably with a different index configuration. It could lead to suboptimal index usage if the existing index doesn't have the exact same options as the intended one. So the existing index has some configuration. If the intended index configuration don't match the existing index configuration, I mean, apart from the name not matching, if the configuration doesn't match, then the expected or the intended configuration or options on the index is not present in the existing index, and the existing index is there and it's working or probably not working, or not working to the best performance. That's why suboptimal performance probably. So the actual index is with different options than the existing index, and the actual index is not getting created, I think, because different name but same field. So so that is one problem. So performance, while not immediately critical as an index on XYZ, it still exists. It could lead to suboptimal index usage if the existing index doesn't have the same options as the intended one. And then storage, having duplicate indexes or indices, even if creation is failing. Like creation is failing, can waste storage space. Like in this case, the creation is failing, but if the creation doesn't fail, duplicate indexes can waste storage space. And then the maintenance makes it harder to manage and update indexes in the future. Like if there is an administrator or someone who is maintaining the service, it's harder for them to understand, manage and update indexes in the future if there's like all these extra duplicate indexes or indices. So this is one example of the Loki MCP server in action. I tried out the Loki MCP server in action in my local with the same thing. I noticed some interesting stuff. For example, the first thing that the AI did was, so I used the auto AI, so not anything specific. So I just said auto, which means it will use anything, I think, instead of saying specifically use Claude and all. So when I said get the exceptions in XYZ servers in the last 1 hour and gave the current date and time, so it said I'll help you get the exceptions from XYZ servers and all. I can see from your MCP configuration that you have access to Loki for log querying. So let me query the logs for the XYZ servers. So it's running Loki query directly. It knows how the Loki query looks like. For example, in this case, it says open curly brace, close curly brace, and then says service is equal to XYZ. And it looks for is it equal to error or is it equal to exception. So, and gives the start and end time and says limit is 100 and format is JSON. So it says no logs found matching the query is the result. So it was like, let me try a broader search to see what logs are available in the XYZ servers. Instead of just error and exception, it said, okay, I'll look for all logs. So it gave servers, XYZ servers, and it still couldn't find no logs because the label name was wrong. It's not servers. Our Loki, we have the label name for the service as app. So let me check what services are available in the logs to see if the service name might be different. So it thought XYZ servers, maybe it says XYZ-service-1 or something like that, right? Or is it just XYZ? So it was looking for the names, and to understand, is it looking for the wrong name? So it looked for all the values for service and it found no values. It said the result was like no values found for label service. So then let me check what labels are available in the Loki logs basically. Because if there is no label value present for service, maybe the service label itself is not present. So it's checking that. Let me check what labels are available. So it checks all the labels, say app, component, customer ID, entity ID, instance, mobile number, namespace, promotion ID. So these are the um, what do you say, different labels. And then there is also a stream shard. I think it's probably Loki related. These are the different labels. So it understands that I can see that the available label names don't include service but do include app. So basically it understood that service label name is not even there. And that's why there are no values also available, but there can be a service label name, by the way, and these values can still be missing, which is a different problem to check. In this case, service is not the label name, so it was app, so it looked for it. Let me search for the XYZ service using the app label. So it looked for the XYZ service, app is equal to XYZ, and it found no logs. Let me check what app values are available if the service name might be different. So maybe it's app equal to XYZ, or app equal to XYZ hyphen service hyphen 1 or hyphen A or B, something, right? So it got all the service names by looking at all the label values for the given app label. And so just a moment. And it found that great, I can see that XYZ is indeed available as an app. Let me now search for errors and exceptions. So it looked for errors and exceptions, but it found no logs. Let me try a broader search to see if there are any logs at all for the index, the XYZ service in the specified time range. And it found that there are no logs again for that. So let me try searching for any logs that might contain XYZ in the log content. So it found, in this case, so it was looking for any logs that might contain XYZ in the log content, basically the name of the service. In this case, there was a 400 error by the server, by the MCP server. It said MCP error minus 32603, query execution failed, HTTP error 400, parse line at line 0, column 1, syntax error, unexpected. The logql query was actually not good, right? So so it says based on my queries in the Loki logs, I found the following results. Summary of log analysis for XYZ service, time range results. The XYZ service is available in the Loki logs, confirmed in the app labels. No logs found for the XYZ service in the specified 1 hour time window. No errors or exceptions were found for the XYZ service during this period. What this means, the XYZ service exists in your environment because it's coming up in the label value given the app label name. However, there were no log entries generated by this service in the last 1 hour. This could indicate the service might not be actively running or processing requests, so that's why no logs. Or the service might be running but not generating logs. Let's say some issue with the service, it is getting requests, but and it is running, but it's not generating logs. And there might there might be a logging configuration issue, right? Because of which I think logs are not being sent to Loki, or maybe logging is not working in the service because of that, so hence not generating logs. So the service might be running on a different environment or namespace. Interestingly, the label value comes up. So anyways, so it says it might be running in a different environment or namespace. So recommendation, verify that XYZ service is currently running and active. Check if there are any recent deployments or changes to the service. Consider expanding the time range to see if there are logs from earlier periods. Verify the logging configuration for the service. Would you like me to search for logs in a broader time range? Check for logs from related services like XYZ or XYZ hyphen Nginx hyphen A or XYZ hyphen PHP hyphen A or something. Search for any logs that might contain XYZ in the content. So that it already tried, but it failed. That's why it's saying again. So this is one example that I had. And another example, before I go, I'll take a small break and then come to the other example. Just a moment. Hey, I'm back. So basically, I'm not getting any logs in my query results, Loki query results. I think it's mostly because it's in a different environment, because my teammate who built the MCP server was trying it out in a different environment for the same XYZ service and for the same timeline or time range. So with the same, I tried the same thing with the same time period or time range, and I tried the same query again in the same environment for the same service, just to see if it can actually find out something. It ended up doing the same thing, which is using service as the label name, later trying out for using service as the label name, and then finding out all the errors and exceptions, and then later not finding out errors and exceptions, but instead getting all the logs for the service, using service as the label name. Finally, it got the label values. Given service as the label name, it found no values for the service label name. Then it found all the labels that are available. It found out there is app and all, and then it understood that let me check what app values are there, if the service might be labeled as an app. So it found out that there are many services named blah 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 service and all that, using app as the label name. So finally, one moment. Finally, it used the app label name and the label value XYZ service, and it was looking for errors and exceptions, and it didn't find anything. And then it tried without looking for just errors and exceptions, but instead looked for everything, all the logs, and it found no logs. So let me try searching for a longer time period, and it found some logs then when it was a longer time period. So it changed the time period basically. Instead of just last 1 hour, it took from that day start, that is 12 a.m. till that time, and it found out some results. So it found out some logs. So then it said, now let me search specifically for errors and exceptions in the last 1 hour from the XYZ service, and again it found nothing. So let me also try searching for warning level logs which might indicate issues. It found nothing. Let me try a broader search to see if there are any logs at all from the XYZ service in the last 1 hour. This it did before itself, I think, and found nothing, I think. Just a moment, let me see. Yeah, it found this before. It did this before itself, like app is equal to XYZ service, and find all the logs, but it didn't find anything. And it also did app is equal to XYZ service, looking for errors and exceptions. Anyways, so and it found nothing around. It also tried telling error in capital or E in exception, E in capital and exception and whatnot, and then look for warning, warn, and all that. And then so it says, based on my analysis of the logs from the XYZ service, here's what I found. So it says summary last 1 hour. So good news, no errors or exceptions were found in the XYZ service logs during the specified time period. So key findings: no error logs, no error level logs, exceptions or error messages were detected in the last 1 hour. No warning logs, no warn level logs were found that might indicate potential issues. And then service activity: the service appears to be running normally with health check endpoints /ping and then /thrift /is healthy responding successfully. So it has some logs which says /ping and then 200 okay, I guess. So metrics endpoint /metrics being accessed by Prometheus, and then normal request processing with info level logs. So basically this was when it found out logs around other stuff. For example, some info level logs, and then what else? Request context, container request, and there are quite some logs this one. So thrift is healthy, 200, and then what else? Forensics. There are quite some logs in the log data. Multi-line logs, I guess, which is all coming as some single line of sorts, like multiple single lines and stuff all put together. Something to check out. So this is a Java application and it's showing some multiple class names with just single letter. There's a.c. blah 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 dot, and then multiple things. So it has thrift healthy, and then what else? It has I don't know where it got the metrics request. Let me check. Maybe it found it in the logs. I didn't notice it though. Yeah, there's no metric though. Anyways, looks like somehow it found out that there is a metrics endpoint and all that, and you know, apart from just ping and oh yeah, there is a metrics endpoint, and it clearly says the user agent is Prometheus 2.40.5 and all. So it's able to say that Prometheus only scraped the metrics endpoint and not some other service or whatever, right? And yeah, normal request processing with info level logs. And then recent activity, the last logs from the service were around some 11:40 p.m. So 11:40 a.m. IST, showing normal operation with successful health checks, HTTP 200 responses, normal request processing through various filters, Prometheus metrics collection. Conclusion: the XYZ service appears to be operating normally without any errors or exceptions in the last 1 hour. So in the last 1 hour, no errors and exceptions. The service is responding to health checks and processing requests successfully. If you are experiencing issues, they might be related to different servers, network connectivity issues, client-side problems, issues outside the 1 hour window we checked. So would you like me to search for a longer time period or check other related services or for potential issues? Is what it asked me finally. So that's my experience using the Loki MCP server, which we had created internally, and using it. So that's all I had for this video. I'll see you in the next one where I talk about the Prometheus MCP server. Cool, that's all I had for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.